Hey, everybody, welcome to the Home Care Forum podcast with your hosts, Sasha, Guillaume, and Emina Poricanin. Special guest today, Emina, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of the Home Care Forum podcast. We have the distinct honor of welcoming Maureen White from Medicaid Solutions on our episode today. Maureen, tell us a little bit about your background and then kind of lead us up and our listeners to today's gig and what you do as your primary hustle, not your side hustle, but what is your primary hustle?
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Okay, I'm Maureen White. I'm a managing consultant with Medicaid Solutions. My history in the home care space starts way back when in the public sector when the Lombardi program was where it was at in terms of accessing home care. I was the social worker that would partner up with the nurse and we'd go out and do the UAS, come up with a budget and authorize services. That was the roots of where I fell into the managed care space and long-term planning, especially with regards to Medicaid. When MLTCs became a mandatory enrollment, I was very interested in this naturally because I had many clients that were going to be transitioning and I was very protective over them as many providers were during that time. So I took interest in having meetings with them and making sure that the transition was smooth, learning about how that would work in terms of the clients experiencing it, would they get their services cut and beyond. And that's where I started working for managed long-term care plans in a leadership role. It was important that they had someone that understood rather where these clients were coming from, how to communicate in their communities and really deal with the different dynamics of the different counties that spanned New York State. So that was where I jumped into MLTC land, so to speak. And fast forward to now, I'm working for Medicaid Solutions. We're kind of like lone rangers in the home care space, I feel like, because we're not backed or involved with huge corporate America, so to speak. But for better or for worse, we take a voice of the patient. We are on the opposite side of the table, really trying to see what the impediments are to accessing care and accessing, New York State benefits and beyond. So we do that in an advocacy format, in a strategy format, but Medicaid Solutions is interested to serve patients who are looking to access the benefit of Medicaid, but really need someone in their corner who's going to help them navigate all the barriers. That's a very loaded process. We help people with Medicaid applications, the complexity between the different varying incomes and assets that they have. We help people access pooled income trusts if they make too much money, or they want to shelter their money rather, and soup to nuts accessing the home care space all the way to institutional. So home care, independent living, assisted living, and nursing home settings, including memory care. So that's where I'm at today.
The primary listeners of our podcast are home care providers. The majority of them are New York based and dependent on Medicaid reimbursement for the services that they provide. At a high level, can you tell us, and feel free to use numbers and some thresholds, at a high level today, what makes someone qualified for community home care Medicaid services?
Unfortunately, sometimes it depends on the county. There's
Okay.
nuances to how assets are counted,
Okay.
retirement accounts specifically. Some counties want to count, they want you to maximize your retirements. Other counties want you to take the required minimum, and that's well enough. So there's definitely nuances. It's not a really cookie cutter approach. And that's why many people come to us because they want something that's specific to their financial story. But broad strokes, a single person, a little over $32,000 in the bank, a married couple going on Medicaid, a little over $43,000 in the bank. But those are just small pillars. Of course, we talk a lot about protecting your home, protecting your children, trying to plan for the future. So ultimately, every client has somewhat of a unique application, and we treat each one individually. So.
Maureen, I just wanted to kind of hone in on the type of clients that you're working with. How early on do you recommend them contacting you or engage you for these services, right? Because a lot of people are taking care of kids, then they become the sandwich generation, and then next thing you know, they're looking at getting services themselves, right? So if they didn't do anything to protect their assets, I'm guessing a lot of people are catching you pretty late. But how early would you recommend, and versus what are you seeing in the clients? What are the demographics?
We're always trying to avoid what I call crisis Medicaid planning. And although a good book of our patients are coming to us in that position where they're faced with the care need and now they're starting to think about those financial decisions, we're really trying to avoid that crisis snap decision type of approach. So to answer your question, the sooner the better, right? Even for someone in their 40s and 50s and 60s, you should be thinking about that chapter in your life. And people say, oh, isn't that end of life planning? Isn't that the end of the road? Nobody has a crystal ball of when you're going to need these services and benefits. So ultimately, one of the things I like to say to my clients is we're not looking to hide your money from the state. We're not looking to manipulate the state. We're looking to prepare for scenarios that you could be facing and elongate the assets that you have. It's important to get ahead of the planning. There's things currently such as the 5-year look back, which is, that trigger word for seniors right now and people that are planning if they have a disability for accessing state benefits in an institution. So 5-year look back means you do anything with your money, so to speak, 5 years leading up to needing an institutional Medicaid application, there could be implications of the state approving that Medicaid application. People will come to us and say, oh, I gifted my daughter money to put a patio in. It was my gift to the family. Oh no, what am I going to do? I'm never going to get Medicaid. There's opportunities really for every client to deal with circumstances like that, meaning they didn't understand that there would be, there could be some blowback to that financial offload. But ideally, people should be thinking about themselves and especially people in the aging population in that next chapter of their life sooner than later. The more in advance you or your clients or patients, if home care providers are listening, are really having these discussions, the more options they have and the more opportunity they have to stretch the resources that they have. Ultimately, Medicaid sometimes doesn't fit the bill for every home care patient or every institutional patient, right? So the people that are listening in the home care space, they know that there are clients that go through this process of assessments and NIAs, and they have their heart set on 10, 20, 24 hours a day, whatever it may be. And that might be a very varied income or outcome of what they're going to be approved for. It's an opportunity for you not only to have choice around what happens to your assets, but choice around how to use them if you're in the pitfalls of, I really think my mom needs 15 hours a day, but she was only approved for 5 hours a day. Well, now because you've maybe made some proper planning, you can supplement that so that you have the care that you feel at least that person needs. So you're really elongating and making sense of those resources long term.
That 5-year look back is a term that triggering for people's attention, but also clawbacks. Can you speak to that?
We get a lot of redo Medicaid applications at Medicaid Solutions. So those are people that may have applied and really weren't given the full spectrum understanding of what it means when you shelter assets or when you fail to shelter assets. So Medicaid has this thing called Medicaid estate recovery, and we heavily educate about this because we want our clients to be fully informed, right? Our job is to not tell applicants what to do. Our job is to educate and be kind of a mechanism between what exists and the realities of home care, right? That's where that Lone Ranger comes in because we're going to keep it real with them. We're going to let them know this is how it really works. Do what you want with that information. And ultimately, we don't determine eligibility at Medicaid Solutions. We don't determine eligibility for home care. We don't determine eligibility for Medicaid. We're kind of a vehicle between the two to help people understand that concept. But in terms of Medicaid estate recovery, if you're not in a position to do proper planning and you throw an app together, get it in the mail without thinking about your home or the money that you may have sheltered, upon the death of the applicant or the placement into an institution, if you haven't done proper planning, Medicaid could try to come after the assets that were moved and or not protected through trust or through proper chain of command as far as paper trail is concerned. So there's quite a bit of clawback that can happen if you don't go about protecting and or sheltering your assets in the right way.
We are in an industry where a majority of people receiving are on Medicaid, and as well as the workers are on Medicaid, right? So later in life, they will transition to possibly receiving Medicaid services as well. One thing about this population is that they also are immigrants from overseas, right? And a lot of them sometimes they think about going back home. If they have qualified for Medicaid, what happens to that when they go overseas? If you can speak to Medicare and Medicaid.
Yeah, there's not a lot of carryover from my experience. I'm not a subject matter expert per se because a lot of our focus is on the New York State benefit. But what I do experience with my own clients is that there are some that come to us for a consultation and say, I'm torn between the concept of, gathering my dollars and cents and moving abroad because it might be a cheaper place to retire. And there may be a lot of truth to that. And staying put because New York State is just they're known to be very generous with having no look back for community Medicaid and the benefits that they provide. For people that want to travel abroad, if they're using the benefit of MLTC, it's going to be an issue for them because technically, you're not really supposed to be without services for over 30 days and still maintain the benefit. There's nuances to that, of course, there's allowances with that, but you can't live somewhere else and accept services here, or at least take absence from them for a prolonged period of time. People are faced with this decision of trying to make ends meet here and better or worse, or for lack of services, and then deciding maybe I just take my retirement and take it to the road because it might be cheaper abroad to access care, even if I have to forego Medicare and Medicaid in New York State or in the United States, rather.
Well, can we pivot to the federal level and changes that have occurred in the last couple of years? We have more recent changes as well, and how that impacts Medicaid planning, long-term care, and are there any upcoming proposals that you're looking out to see how that can impact in the future?
The buzzword of the 30-month look back is definitely a hot topic. We're usually talking people off the ledge with that, so to speak, especially when there was a change in administration, because people were like, "Oh, we're never going to be able to get Medicaid now. Should I apply proactively?" For us, we try to deal with the here and now, but also empower our clients to start having those at least discussions to know where they're at and where they fall on the current spectrum. It's kind of hard to plan in the future so far because this is a moving target right now. I can think back to when those Lombardi days were around, and I thought all of the tactics or whatever you want to call them, as far as like these impending changes, they just never seem to come to fruition. And I feel like now, rapid fire, the things that were like, oh, that'll never happen, it's too big of an undertaking, or it's not for the people and the patients, so that this could never pass. And then they pass. So I think for most, you need to deal with the here and now, but start forecasting a bit. You need to look into your future, regardless of age and disability, and more so based on age and disability. Again, back to the Lombardi days, managed care and MLTCs were a big pill to swallow, right? And I think I have a little bit of deja vu now with PPL and all these other changes. It's like, how do we move past this? How do we move forward? Or do we keep pushing against this? And there's good and bad to both, right? In my opinion. But I think for most people, you have to educate yourself, know what your options are. Don't say this isn't going to happen to me, or my mom's fine, she'll never need a nursing home. Remember, nursing homes many of them also operate rehabs, and those supplements only take you so far. So another misnomer about this planning discussion is to understand you might get into a car accident. You might get hurt or something might happen to you, and you have insurance. That's great. You have Medicare and a very expensive supplement. That's awesome. But those things tap out. And if your pockets can't afford that daily rate, you are talking about an institutional Medicaid application sometimes. So these discussions can go a long way, however you slice it. But again, back to your question, a lot of the buzzwords are about lookbacks. And that would mean that same 5-year look back that now is, current for nursing home could get enacted for community. So for clients now that are saying, oh, I'll put it in a trust, I owe my daughter money, whatever it is that they're doing to move around money, that may no longer be an option if that were to come to fruition. I have no gauge on whether that's in the horizon or not.
Can you talk a little bit more, Maureen, about the increase to three ADLs in New York for personal care services? So you and I had the pleasure of seeing each other at a home care event hosted by the New York State Association for Home Care, and that was something that you and I talked about, that the group talked about a lot. I don't even know where to begin. There are so many issues and things that we touched on that day, you and I as well. So tell us a little bit first, starting out with what I'm referring to, because I'm sure there are listeners who are going to be like, "What? What does that mean? What's exactly the change?" And before you get into like what the complications are that we're already seeing.
Sure. And this will be like a no-brainer for the home care space, right? They're like, we know this. But in case anybody in reality, in the real world, hears this, when you are, just to give you like the timeline, when you're trying to access home care under MLTCs, managed long-term cares, you have to get a NIA, right? And that NIA has eligibility criteria. That eligibility criteria has recently changed effective September 1. So where someone may have had a few less than three ADL needs and still pass go and keep moving in this enrollment process, now effective September 1, you either need to have limited assistance, as far as the best to my knowledge, with three or more ADLs and or have this new dementia, what we're calling the dementia form, filled out if you have that diagnosis, which kind of gives you a boost. Again, this is all to my understanding, in your NIA assessment outcome. So I'll tell you, when I first heard about this, again, and this could have been back in the day, I would say, oh, no big deal. And even now, I'm like, well, I would assume most people really have this need, right? Like three ADLs, bathing, dressing, toileting, there you go. But it's not everybody that has those needs. Of course, need is on a spectrum. So that's obvious. But another thing is that a lot of patients that think they're expressing this true level of need on three ADLs is actually a challenge for them. So the issue is that if you don't use the love language of the state and truly articulate your level of need at the time of those two-part NIA assessments, you could get a letter in the mail saying, I'm sorry, while you need some help, you don't need enough help to continue on in this process. Maybe they're eligible for PACE, maybe they're eligible for another program, but clients of ours specifically are facing this dilemma. They're really forced to make sure that they are articulating what the true level of need is. And that's always the case. It's always the case to be honest with the state and tell what you're like on a daily basis, but you will not move forward. So it's a denial.
And then what are the challenges that we're seeing, or that, because I know you're seeing these things with the assessment tool
Mhm.
that is being utilized?
Yeah, there's a lot of gaps there. I like to say love language of the state because I see the purpose in these tools. You have to put boundaries and barriers on things that allow people to move forward or not with state benefits. I'm a taxpayer. I care about these things. I care about ethics and I care about tools that have fruitful outcomes and are, based in protecting our aging population. We're all going to be there. You want to hope that policymakers and and beyond, those that are sitting around the table and having maybe closed or open door conversations, really care about the outcome of these people, because we're all not going to avoid it, right? So that's where my heart is at. That's where I want to think. But the people that make these tools, maybe they're not as attuned to how, maybe there's some overcorrecting that's happening, right? They're trying to circumvent the fact that these programs have completely blown out of the water the Medicaid benefit. And there's, lots and lots of dollars that are going to that. And I get that. But at the end of the day, some of the overcorrecting is preventing, it just is, the people who really need these services from accessing them. So in our advocacy and in our education role, that's where we're really making these, this education a tool of empowerment, because without that, in absence of that, clients are completely shooting themselves in the foot and thinking there's a lot of pride, right? We're dealing with seniors who, to talk about how you do these ADLs is humiliating. So some of that, goes to the wayside if you don't have someone in your corner, again, explaining what the intent behind the question is. Answer it how you want to answer it as truthfully as you can. That's great. But if the person sitting on the other side of the table doesn't truly articulate what's going on behind closed doors day to day because of pride or fear that they're going to go into a nursing home, you better believe they're not going to express it. And I don't know that the state, whether it's in their power to or not, is supposed to reach in that regard. But there's people that are not getting these services because it's just not set up in a way that, encourages honesty around the answer, around the question. So again, it's a real challenge. And then these people, they wind up hurt. They wind up right in the nursing home costing more money anyway. So the overcorrecting is an issue right now.
Yeah, I find that, or I hear stories of older people who culturally, you come into their home, they're going to get you a cup of coffee. They might be struggling to get you a cup of coffee, but they want to receive you because you're
Yeah.
coming to help them.
Yeah.
And something like that denies them service. So it is it's kind of like a standardized test. You need to know how to respond to these things, right? You're teaching to the test, unfortunately, and now the test just got more difficult. So let me ask this question. So somebody comes to U.S. system, they qualify for and are receiving Medicaid. Is that the end of the relationship, or is there a continuing service that is needed? And why is this continuing relationship needed?
We have a lot of friends after we help them. We're supposed to cut the cord, so to speak, after we've rendered service, but we can't. I mean, we know too much to not stay involved in these people's lives. But in terms of scope of work, our job is to educate, help them understand the maze of Medicaid, access Medicaid if needed, and then understand the pillars of aging in place, right? Does this person look like they're a candidate for home care? Maybe or maybe not. What is the difference between home care and assisted living? And then once they're in their landing spot, as far as they've got Medicaid and we've set up their trust, we've worked with a skilled attorney who understands the language again of Medicaid, because not one size fits all, as I'm sure you know, Emina, in terms of attorneys. Everybody has their specialty. And even in the space of elder planning attorneys, there are ones that write, trust one way and trust another. So there's so many nuances. But for clients that get their Medicaid, and we've helped them get to that point in the game, which is a challenge in and of itself. We have such a longevity with the people after the fact in what we like to call home care navigation. Because again, is it PACE? Is it MLTC? Is it assisted living? Is it memory care? Is it nursing home care? And all of those programs have their own set of criteria and buckets. So we do put a lot of effort into that hand-holding experience so that really we're not, wiping our hands at the end of that application saying, okay, now that you've got your pretty Medicaid card, you're on your way. There is a whole nother side of the coin which most professionals, especially in the legal space, tap out. It's either not in their expertise or it's just too cumbersome for them, or that's just not their space. And that's where we tap in. In fact, many attorneys lean on us in that regard. They might do an irrevocable trust, they might do wills and POAs, power of attorneys, and then they might even go to the extension of a Medicaid application. Some don't. And then they'll tap in and say, Medicaid Solutions, this is your wheelhouse. Can you take over? Because they're going to need true guidance on like how to move forward. What is this state assessment about? How do they deal with the plans? Sometimes these clients are getting through their NIAs and they're just sitting. They have no idea that there's like a whole nother piece that you have to engage with a plan and get an offer. So sometimes we get clients that have done their Medicaid elsewhere. They've gone through the NIA and now they've just been sitting for months, and they'll call us and say, when does the home care kick in? And we're like, did you get that letter? We have to like tap into those steps, but like there's quite a bit of timeline and steps involved in going from A to Z. So that's where we try to be of service to our clients. And then we are going to be launching something called Solutions Plus, where clients can tap in more regularly and have engagements with us for understanding, whatever their needs are at the time.
Maureen, what would you say is the area where your company brings most value in this process for the populations that's looking to get on Medicaid?
I'd say home care navigation. Again, we know enough legally to be dangerous, right? We're never going to pretend to be attorneys. We're always going to lean on attorneys for that legal space and that terminology and that those documents. But we know enough to say you're going to want to think about this. You're going to want to think about your home. You're going to want to think about that IRA. You're going to want to put beneficiaries on that bank account. We really put a lot of earnest in those discussions because that's where a lot of other Medicaid representative or consultants maybe they're not comfortable or they don't have the expertise to really arm their clients with those decision-making points. But the real home care navigation is important. Like I said, I come from Lombardi and MLTC world. And Colin, who owns Medicaid Solutions, has been doing this for years. She started out in the social work space. We've both worked with CHAS. So that home care space is embedded in our roots here. So we use that experience in our careers to now tell clients, just so you know, this is how these programs operate. Do with that information as you want. But that's where we shine, is helping really take a very complex system and bringing it down on a patient level to say, let's start at step A and then we'll work our way to step Z because it's almost that many steps.
My last question for you, Maureen, is on technology that you may use to onboard these patients who are or may not be that technologically savvy. And are you able to engage them in that format, or are you working maybe with their kids to assist in technology?
Primarily are the people we're interfacing with are the kids, right? It's the kids coming to us saying, wow, I thought mom and dad would use that nugget that they left in their bank account for this point in their lives, but they're outliving their money. In fact, most clients are outliving their money. They could have a home, they can even have a second home and money in the bank and retirement, and it's not enough. That's how expensive home care is. Those are the people that we're normally interacting with. Yes, for the most part, they're technically savvy if they need to get documents together, if they need to deal with the VA. We deal with a lot of veterans, especially veterans who have not been informed about aid and attendance, a huge asset to be tapping into if you're eligible. Many, many people don't know about it. So thankfully at Medicaid Solutions, we have our own proprietary technology that has allowed people to stay on task. What are they missing? What do we need from them? And again, it's a lot of, we're easy to reach. Accessibility is everything during this process. Being able to pick up the phone and say, I know we talked about this at our consultation. Can you explain it again? I'm at this point in the steps. Can you help me? And I think that goes really a long way, whether you're a senior working with us or a younger person who can do a good Google search. It's really important to dial a friend during the process and say, we're hearing this from managed care. What does this mean? And being able to have a resource for that.
Let's talk a little bit more about the language of what types of trusts there are. There are references to irrevocable trusts versus revocable. And I personally don't do this type of law, which I consider to be elder law, really. But like you said, Maureen, it is a bit of a specialty, even though we lawyers are not supposed to say we specialize in anything. So, without giving any legal advice whatsoever, in layman's terms, talk to our listeners a little bit about what it actually means to set up a pooled income trust and what is the lawyer going to do on something like this?
Yeah, so we have great partner attorneys, and partner is a loose term. It's people we've built a rapport with. It's people that we know have seen clients to the finish line in terms of some of these very important legal documents. Most of our clients are using pooled income trust. Pooled income trust allows someone who has excess income over the limit, right? There's a limit for how much money you can have sitting in the bank, so to speak, liquid or not. And then there's limits to how much revolving monthly income or quarterly, however you're getting your income, you can have. It's basically like Medicaid's catching you from both ends. You could have no money in the bank, but you could have a great monthly income. And so Medicaid says you have a standard to hit and keep at for what's sitting around. And you also have a benchmark that you can't go above, so to speak, for what's coming in every month. So in that regard is the pooled income trust. So many clients, in order to shelter that excess and live off of it, need to tap into a pooled income trust. Our role is to be the middle guy or gal between that experience, explaining it, options for using it, and making sure clients don't throw their hands in the air when they do that Google search and say, oh my gosh, you can only have $1,800 if you're a single person. Well, mom's a widow. She has way more than $1,800 a month. She doesn't qualify. So we kind of demystify a little bit of that in our consultation with our clients to make sure they know there's a little bit more to the story when you're talking about the formulary of what Medicaid considers excess income or not. So we heavily rely upon our pooled trust companies to make sure that those clients have accessible trust, pooled income trust, to take that excess instead of handing it over to Medicaid and maybe foregoing paying a bill, to then put it in the trust and allow them to take it back out and pay Con Ed or whatever it may be. So that's pooled income trust. Irrevocable trust and revocable trust come into play often with our clients that are thinking about an institutional Medicaid application. They also come into play when you're in the community, protecting your home, putting assets away, rainy day, whatever it may be. But the main differentiator that we know about, again, we don't have that full-blown conversation. We lean on our attorney partners for that, is to tell clients that, if your asset is not in your name, is out of your name for the 5 years leading up to the institutional Medicaid placement, you're good. So you open up in your irrevocable trust, you put your home in it, you put $100,000 in it, and it sits there for 5 years. And 5 years in day one, mom needs a nursing home. That money is not part of the 5 year look back in terms of doing a penalty or counting those assets. Fine. But what some people don't understand is if you put those same assets in an irrevocable trust and anything shy of that 5 years in a day, they then need an institutional Medicaid application. You may have to break the trust and tap into those resources, because no matter where you stick them, your mattress, your children, or a trust, they have to be out of your name for 5 years in order for that look back to clear. That's something that, attorneys work with our clients on, is to explain those nuances, those differences. Unfortunately, some clients come to us and say, we're great. We put everything away in a revocable trust years ago. So mom needs a nursing home and we're ready to go. Revocable means it can be revoked. So in most counties, if not all, they're going to totally count that as like a fancy bank account, avoiding probate. That's great, but you didn't avoid that 5 year look back. So again, those are the main pillars of those trusts in terms of our clients, protecting assets and planning for a 5 year look back.
And also, Maureen, I think many people are familiar with the 5 year look back when it comes to nursing homes, but just draw a quick distinction between that and community Medicaid for home care services. And that criteria has changed in the last few years as well.
Yeah, and that's where this fear of the 30-month look back is coming in. So you have a client, that client, maybe they don't have a lot of assets, right? Not enough to live on a private pay arrangement with home care till the end of time. And we don't know what the end of time is, right? So their children might come to us and say, mom is outliving this money. In terms of these different pillars, if you're going to stay home or in an assisted living and access community-based Medicaid, you can take assets that put you outside of the limits of Medicaid's asset benchmark and put it in a trust. You can also give it to children. You can do whatever you want with the money. You can move it out of your name within reason, right? Whatever you want is broad statements. But ultimately, you can move money out of your name and pursue Medicaid to see if you're eligible. If you are in the realm of the Medicaid as far as institutional, you cannot do the same thing. So that's where the 5 year look back comes. It basically says, we're going to look back 5 years, and anything you did can and will be held against you if you're trying to tap into this Medicaid benefit. So again, it doesn't mean it's the end of the story for these applicants. They might have to do additional strategy, but it gives them less options if they're not doing this in advance. And if there was a 30-month look back, people who may have offloaded or gifted money, whatever it may be, might be subject to a penalty, which means for X amount of months, they wouldn't be able to tap into the benefit. Again, those are just kind of rumors at this point.
Maureen, you've been in home care for such a long time, kind of off the script feedback, given the MLTC experience you have and all of these criteria on Medicaid changing and the obvious effort of New York State to condense, not because of desire to restrict services, but just condense because of financial and fiscal reasons, the scope of home care. I have questions all the time from investors and people coming into the space. Number one, where is this going? It looks like it's going to be a much, much smaller industry, number one. Just interested in your kind of looking glass perspective. And then two, what do you think of all of these MLTC consolidations and the pressure on MLTCs? I
Yeah.
would love your take on that.
I don't know if I'm the right person to ask because I'm a glass half full kind of gal. I feel like everything happens for better or for worse. So, and sometimes I feel like things happen that are not right in order to allow for kind of like things to level set, right? So maybe things are really going in the wrong direction. I don't know what direction they're going in to answer you, but if they're going in the wrong direction and things just get so tight that we level set, so to speak, things that are great, I'm sure will come from that. So I always have faith that sometimes you need to hit rock bottom, and that might mean nursing homes fill up and hospitals fill up, and we, can't deal with people who deserve the most dignity and care during this chapter in their life in order for true change to come and people who really understand how you should determine eligibility to be in those seats and create these assessment tools. Not to say that the people who are making these decisions or tools are not skilled enough, but there's definitely there's layers to this that negate kind of the overall focus and limit people who truly need the service from getting it. That's just the truth of it. So I don't know which way it's going. I hope we're going on the up and up. It's horrible that there's consolidation because it means that people who really have a passion for this may or may not be in these roles anymore. But ultimately, again, I'm one that believes that, ultimately, if this is the rock bottom, you can only go up. So hopefully that will pressure enough policymakers and advocacy and all those that, use their voice for this to finally get in a position where they're decision makers.
I don't have any more questions. My head's still spinning a little bit, honestly, from all of the
Wow.
information. But I guess before we depart and end the episode, is there anything that you think our listeners should know? And not necessarily about your qualifications and the services, because you're great, but what if you had the platform, which you do, to just bullhorn some important points for our listeners that you haven't highlighted already, what would those be?
That's a loaded question. I feel like if I have to simplify it, something I say a lot is follow through is everything. I can't stress enough how, again, your audience knows how complicated it is to go from getting Medicaid. And that is challenging, especially I'm talking a lot about people who have assets and children who can afford to hire a fancy consultant and see this process through. But there's many people that are isolated and don't have that. And I know your listeners know that. Follow through is so important, right from the person that's answering your calls at your agency. If they can't take a message and that message being, I need care, and really see it through to get that call back and get those answers answered, that is really like the biggie for me. Like you need to be able to follow through from soup to nuts, any department in your agency. Answer the call, return the call, make the referral, make sure the person that's getting the referral got the referral. Those little pillars of engagement, I mean, it goes for any business, home care or not, are so important because we get so many people that says, why didn't anyone explain this to me? How come I didn't know this years ago? Why didn't anyone explain lookbacks? Like, and they've been involved with so many professionals before they come to us. So arm your staff with education as much as you can. Have us in for a presentation. We'll be happy to educate as much as we can, so that anybody that interfaces with this population has enough information to empower these people so that they have decision-making opportunities.
Okay. I seem to recall very vividly this phrase, the home care genie. We were in a meeting years ago, and one of these home care insiders, operators, was commenting how families will typically call his agency, and they were Cha and Alexa as well. And they were like, my mom just got released from the hospital. Can you send a home health aide? And he said, people seem to think there is this home care genie out there that will just send a nurse and an aide, and they have no idea what the difference is. And then they're surprised when it's not an RN that they're getting. But I always think of that phrase, the home care genie, because
Yeah.
You are right. There is so much misunderstanding about the multi-layer process that it
Right.
takes to even be eligible for these services. And
Mhm.
I think, unfortunately, until you're in the situation where you have to have it, most people don't plan for this. And so it's important for, I did it because I'm in this space. I did it for my parents. We are past the 5-year mark now.
Yeah.
But I went through this, and again, being in home care, I still learned a lot going through that with the attorney we retained to do this for them. But no, it's not clear cut. It's not easy, and people really do need to have someone shepherding them through every layer of this very complicated onion. All right, Sasha, wrap it up. I've been wrapping up, and I am not good at this. Obviously, you wrap it up.
All right. Thank you, Emina, for that. And thank you, Maureen White of Medicaid Solutions. This has been very helpful information, great questions. And I will be reviewing this many times over to make sure I capture it all. This has been the Home Care Forum podcast with your hosts, Sasha, Guillaume, and Emina Poricanin. Have a good one.